All right, guys, in today's video, we're gonna be talking about how to think like a $20,000 a month closer. All right, I've been in this game now since 2019. I have earned hundreds of thousands of dollars a year as a high ticket closer. I have personally managed and trained closers within our agency to earn their first 10 and in some cases $20,000 a month. And we've also worked with a lot of individuals outside of our agency in our sales training program, Millionaire Closers, to accomplish that mark as well. Okay, now I just want to be very clear. This mark of $20,000 a month, this is probably a number that I would say less than 1% of closers hit, just based off the top of my head from what I've seen. And the reason why is because it takes a little bit more than just a great offer. Okay, and also it takes a little bit more than just a great skill set and being good on the phones. Okay, really what it's all about is being that guy, being the kind of individual that's capable of breaking past the 10, hitting $20,000 a month, and ultimately much more, right? All the character traits that we talk about here in this video are going to apply to numbers obviously higher than this as well. These individuals, from what I've seen, they have very distinct character traits, very distinct habits, belief sets that are very different from the average individual that's in sales. And in today's video, I'm going to be breaking down exactly what those things are so that maybe you can identify if you have some of these, maybe you don't. Maybe you can make a decision to start developing some of them and working on it. All right, so let's jump in. Number one, okay, and probably most importantly, is really a delusional self-belief in yourself. Okay, what does that mean? When you look at like videos of like Kobe Bryant, when he was like 18 in like high school, when like the other team was talking shit about him, and then he just like laughed at them, or you look at videos of Conor McGregor, interviewing when he's like, still fucking plumbing and he's like, fighting in the backyards in freaking Ireland, talking about how he's gonna, be a GOAT, how he's gonna be the champion one day, right? The thing is people who truly are great, they know that they are great well before they ever accomplish the results, okay? And they know it for a fact, like very far ahead of time, right? And I think that's the key. And the thing is like you could say that, okay, like do these people just like manifest their fucking goals? I don't believe in that. Well, I think to a certain extent, sure. But I think what it is at the end of the day, like everyone, we all have a belief within ourselves that, we are truly unique and that we can accomplish anything. Or the problem is like that shit gets repressed, right? That gets repressed by your upbringing, by the people around you, by the place you live, by the content that you consume, by all the nonsense, right? But everyone's got a belief in themselves that they can go and fucking destroy everybody. Where you can go and truly accomplish anything that you want. Right? There's a bunch of factors that are working against you. Okay, the kinds of individuals that get to $20,000 a month and significantly more, they know that they are that motherfucker before they ever see the results of that individual. Here's why this translates to sales, right? At the end of the day, your beliefs and your identity and the way that you see yourself, your thoughts in your head, that's what leads to your day-to-day actions every single day, right? If you think that you're a fucking bum and you think that you're a loser, you're gonna act like a fucking loser, right? If you know that you're the shit, if you know that you're capable of making any amount of money that you can make because there's never been more opportunity ever in history, you're gonna go and do the actions necessary to get that result, right? So it all starts with your beliefs and your attitude, right? These individuals who hit this number, they understand before they see any kind of results, they know, yo, if I really went for it, I'd get there, right? Then what happens next is they actually go for it, right? Their beliefs and their thoughts translate into their actions, right? So on a day-to-day basis, right? Well, even when a lot of these guys just start out, right? Like when it comes to, investing into themselves, right? Investing into the skills, the mentorships, the network that they need to go and get to their goals. When they're hopping on a phone call and they're looking at investing into themselves, it's a no-brainer, right? Where you see a lot of guys who are broke, they're in rough situations, but they'll go and slap a massive amount of money on a credit card. Why? Why is it so easy for that individual when another individual is terrified of doing it, right? It's because they have a delusional self-belief. They know where they're going. And that's why taking risks and taking chances and taking massive action is insignificant, right? And that's just one of the steps that becomes easy because of the identity, right? When it comes to the day-to-day inputs, when it comes to training, when it comes to your dials, when it comes to, your skill development, your call recordings, right? Once you know that you're that motherfucker, you start acting like that motherfucker and you start seeing the results of that individual. Okay, that's the first application of that delusional self-belief. The second one, as it translates to a sales context is, when you have an absolute confidence about yourself. I mean, this is what people call aura, right? Like when you know you're that guy, what happens is like people are attracted to it, right? This isn't something that you can necessarily like train on a fucking role play. when you really have that high sense of self-belief and that extreme high sense of self-esteem, which is really what it is, what happens is other people all of a sudden have extremely high belief in you. Someone else might be a little bit uncertain, but just because your conviction in yourself and in every single word that you say and every message that you get across is so strong, someone you might talk to on a phone call, they might be a little bit uncertain, but they're like, yo, like this guy, like he's speaking so directly to me, like this guy's, they feed off of your conviction, right? And then what happens is they give you their money, right? So number one is absolutely an extreme sense of self-esteem and self-belief, almost in some cases to a delusional level. And then that's what, allows you to act and get the results of that individual, okay? Number two is gonna be, these kinds of individuals are typically, they're less money motivated, but they're more competition motivated. Okay, let me explain what I mean by this, because I want to be clear. At the end of the day, you get into sales absolutely to make a shit ton of money, period, right? That's the goal. That's why people do it. But here's the thing, right? Especially when it comes to something like sales, you see a lot of guys who get into this who are younger, right? Who are in their, early 20s or just kind of starting out in their life, right? You see a lot of guys, like even like for myself, like I was, in school studying for a degree, which I knew was complete bullshit. And I knew that I was going to be miserable my entire life if I went down that path. And like at the time, like I was fucking miserable and I'm drinking, smoking, partying, hanging out with losers. I didn't like the situation that I was in. I'm living at my parents' house, and like my goal was to get out of that situation, right? I was motivated by pain, right? So what do? You get into sales, you work your ass off, 12-hour days, 6-7 day weeks, right? You get to like the 5K a month, right? You get to, maybe you start approaching the 10K a month, maybe you hit the 10K a month, right? The thing is like a lot of people get into sales at the start of like their career of making any serious kind of money. And then what happens is like, if you work your ass off for long enough, like it's basically impossible that you're not hitting 5 to 10K a month, right? And what happens is that when a lot of people get into this range, now all of a sudden what got them there is irrelevant anymore, right? Like that motivation of, moving away from your previous pain, it's not there anymore. And now you have to tap into what's your next motivation to get past that $10,000 mark, right? Because at that point, like you're comfortable, like your bills are paid, but I mean, in my opinion, like 10 grand a month isn't really shit, right? But like, I remember when I was in that moment, like when you first start hitting those numbers, it's like, yeah, like you feel like you're fucking rich. You feel like you're on top of the world, right? And then you lose that initial hunger and you never break past the $10,000 a month mark, right? Like this is why I say like probably less than 1% of people actually hit 20K, right? It's because 10 is just like such a fucking barrier where number one, it's like a psychological number. And like, you see it all over the internet. Everyone's talking about $10,000 a month. You've kind of solved your initial like problems and pains and motivations that probably initially got you into this place. So it's like, you need to understand that what got you to where you are is not going to get you to where you want to be, right? What's going to get you to the next level? I remember when I was starting out, like I was never, and I feel like this is just a character trait that I've had throughout my life, like I'm a white dude who's, I was like 6 foot tall when I was like 12 years old, like 5'11", 6 foot tall. So like I got picked onto a basketball team and like I had no skills. Like honestly, I got picked onto a basketball team I had no business being on, right? I really wasn't that good, but what I had was like this crazy just competitiveness, like whenever I'm on the court, like I'm sprinting up and down the court the entire game until my legs are cramping, I'm diving on loose balls, I'm going crazy, like grabbing freaking 5-10 offensive rebounds a game, right? And that's what got me minutes. The exact same thing applied with sales. And this is why you see a lot of guys who are successful in sales, they were successful in some kind of competitive arena earlier on in their life, right? In sales, I remember like, especially early days, right? Like I'd be closing side by side with some of my best friends. And, it would truly piss me the fuck off when I would see like my best friends closing deals. I know that's probably like the wrong mindset, right? Like you want your boys to be winning. And like, obviously, I wanted them to be winning and I was happy for them, right? But like in the moment, like it would piss me the fuck off when I would see someone else throw up a big deal. Meanwhile, I'm in a slump. Or like, even if I'm doing good, right? If I see someone else doing better than me, like it would piss me off, to a certain extent where I was less motivated by making the money and I was more motivated by the leaderboard. I was more motivated than beating other people, right? Again, going back to that, delusional self-belief, because I just knew I was better than other people, and I needed to prove that, right? So, whether it's that competitive nature, right? I think that's one way of looking at it. Probably a better way to phrase it is that, because in sales, right, there's move away and move towards. People are moving away from pain and then people are moving towards pleasure. And if you've ever done any sales calls and you understand that, people are going to move way faster out of a burning building than they will towards, getting fucking ice cream or something. With that said, like you have to tap into something greater, right? I'm talking about legacy, right? I'm talking about, career growth, like true mastery of your craft, right? Like you got to ask yourself, are you motivated by those things? And will those things push you to the same extent that you got pushed from 0 to 10K a month, right? A lot of people don't break past that barrier. Number 3 is that you're not emotional, right? Individuals who hit the $20,000 a month mark and significantly more, nothing phases them, right? When they get hit with things, like it's like you're freaking touching a wall, you know what I mean? Like you don't move, right? And the reason why this is challenging is because sales is a really emotional game, right? Like you're hopping on calls, you have to be totally present with an individual. You have to be totally empathetic to their situation to perform at a high level. A lot of people don't even do that. Like you're very emotionally invested into every single prospect that you speak to, right? And then on top of that, like you're paid in proportion to your performance, right? So like when you're winning, like you feel like a fucking king. When you're not, you feel like shit, right? Your performance will be held back by the level of emotions that you experience, right? Like you have to be, it's not that you don't have emotions, but you learn how to control them properly, right? Let me give you a couple examples. Number 1 is like when you're on your sales calls, right? Like the strongest frame that you can have is being detached from the outcome, right? Eli Wild, Tony Robbins, his all-time top guy, he calls this high intention, low attachment, right? Where you give a fuck about your prospect so deeply, but at the end of the day, you're totally detached from whether or not they buy, right? And like a lot of people say that they are, but it's very hard to truly own that and have that frame on a call, right? That's the strongest frame that you can have, because now you're in a position where you can actually influence someone without them getting a weird vibe off of you, right? Without them being like, oh, this guy's just like a sketchy salesperson who's trying to close me, So, for example, prospect hops on a call and they're like swinging their dick around, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I'm just looking into this. Yeah, I've done all this. I've seen all this success, and I'm just looking to get into this game now. And then all of a sudden, like they're slightly disrespecting you on a call. So then you start like swinging your dick back, and then now you're in this contest, right, of who has the bigger ego when you're trying to close a sale, right? And because you got emotionally invested into the call, you just fucked it up because you can't control your emotion. An even better example is when you get to an end of a conversation and you're in objection handling, right? You see a lot of guys, they know what to do. They role play objection handling over and over, but the reason why they suck at it is because when they get to that end of the call, they get emotional. They get, they're not on their A game. They start getting frustrated with the prospect. And the second that you get fucking frustrated with someone, instantly they sense it, instantly they shut off, and you lose all chances of closing a sale, right? So like, I've seen Cole Gordon talk about this, where like he would say on his calls, like he would feel like he's just like fucking meditating. Like he'd be on a sales call just in total meditation, where he's done it so many times, he's done it over and over, he's just at complete peace, his heart rate is nice and low, and he's going through the process, right? That's really what you want to be on sales calls, right? What about outside of sales calls? Because the other emotional spectrum of this is the highs and the lows, right? You might go through a week where you crush it. You might go through 2 weeks where you're not, right? That 2 weeks where you have a rough sales slump, right? Things don't go your way. All of a sudden you're, at the bottom of the board, right? Like your manager's messaging you. They're like, yo, what the fuck's going on? I don't know, your girlfriend breaks up with you. All of a sudden, you feel like shit. You're like, damn, am I actually good at this? Or was I just lucky this entire time, right? And you start going through all these thoughts, right? And that slump goes from 2 weeks to 3 weeks to 4 weeks to a month. And then, a lot of people end up quitting. Like we've had sales guys who've been extremely talented, but they haven't been able to manage the emotional side of this and the highs and the lows. And then, the moment they hit a slump, they just can't get out of it. A really important concept here when it comes to managing highs and lows is you really do have to be great at detaching yourself. You want to go about your days. My mentor, partner, Dylan, talks about this. You want to be able to go through your days and months and weeks in compartments, right? Day-to-day compartments, right? Where it doesn't matter what happened yesterday, right? It doesn't matter if you had the best day of your life or the worst day of your life. Today is a completely new day, completely blank slate. Right? And you do that every single day. You do that every week. You do that every single month, right? And like, that's something that you got to get intentional about. And that's something that you need to like watch your own thoughts on, right? Because just as I explained it a second ago, that can turn into a deep downward spiral. The best closers, they don't even let that spiral begin, right? Because they're so in control of their thoughts, their mind, their emotions, where they understand the work that they've put in, they understand their skill set to such a deep level their actions are in absolute alignment with their goals, where, those thoughts just never even cross their mind, right? And maybe they have a couple bad days, they make an adjustment, boom, they're back. Okay. Emotional control, very important. And again, the problem is like a lot of guys get into sales and like, the thing is like sales will put years on you. If you're young stepping into this game, like you can't be fucking immature. You can't be a baby. You know what I mean? You gotta take shit on the chin. You gotta man up. You gotta move past this stuff, right? Very important. And the guys who can do that, crush it. Okay. Last one. All right. And I kind of just touched on it there a second ago is, your actions and the individuals who hit these $20,000 months and more, their day-to-day actions outside of sales are in total alignment with their goals and their vision. Okay. Let me explain what I mean. When you're on a sales call, if you've done any kind of sales training, then you understand you're not selling a product to somebody, right? You're not selling a service, you're not selling coaching, you're not selling any of that. What you're selling them is making the change that they're trying to make, right? And specifically, how do you get someone to on the first call talking with you, pull out their credit card and pay in full on making this change, right? How do we get them to take massive action on taking this step, right? The way that you do that is by closing this individual, not on your product or your service, right? But you close them on becoming the kind of individual that they need to be, who would buy your program and who would also accomplish their goals, right? They like align with each other. And that's why, you have moral authority throughout your call, right? That's why you're able to challenge and go hard on your prospects, because you're helping your prospects step into the kind of version that they need to be to hit their goals and to buy your shit. Right? So that's our goal on a sales call, right? The problem is that most salespeople, it's like, when they go through this, like everyone's heard like the whole like version 2.0 close or these different lines or whatever, right? Maybe you have it. But like everyone understands that and you can see it happen live, right? But there's two sides to the coin, right? A lot of people are focused on sales training, words they use, frames, analogies, scripts, shit like that, right? All that stuff is great. But the problem is the other side of that is, your delivery, right? Your tonality, your intention, like your body language and your eye contact with the individual when you say those words, right? A lot of the times it's just completely fake and scripted and practiced from your role play, right? It's not real. And the reason why it's not real is because you're trying to challenge your prospect on stepping into the best version of themselves, on taking massive action on their goals, on being completely accountable over their situation right now, right? By having total belief in themselves and being willing to take this massive step into the dark to go and accomplish their goals when you're not doing shit in your life, right? When you have certain problems in your life that you're not taking massive action on, when you're sleeping in, you're going to bed late, you have bad habits, X, Y, and Z, right? And like exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like if you're watching this video, it's like the things that you shouldn't be doing and that you should be doing, right? And if there's any misalignment in your actions and your goals, this is hurting your bank account, right? And like there's a rule in sales, right, where 10% of your prospects, they're just not going to fucking buy, right? It's just, complete garbage, nothing's going to happen. 10% of your prospects, the other 10, they're going to buy every time, right? Where like you would have to seriously fuck up the call to not be able to close a deal. The 80% in the middle, right? Those are the people that you can influence and that you can close, right? You need to be able, the better that you are at this, the better you are at sales, the more you can capture that 80%, right? When you're dealing with people who, you're gonna have some people on calls who like their mindset is right, they're action takers, they're trying to go all in, right? Those people are gonna close pretty easily. What about the person who has serious limiting beliefs, right? Who has serious limiting beliefs? They're deep in their shit. They're deep in their identity and these deep rooted problems and things that are the exact reason they're in the situation that they're in now. The reason why you can't influence them to overcome it is because you're not practicing what you preach, right? So, and when I say that, you're not practicing what you preach in your own life. Here's what you want to do, right? And honestly, like this was, because I was stuck at when I talk about all of this, I'm talking about all of this from my personal experience of going from $0 to $20,000 months. And I'm also talking from experience of other closers that we've worked with who've hit this number. You want to, like for me personally, there was a point where like, I'd spent a couple of years in sales and I was like, yo, like fuck this. Like I need to take this to a completely different level. I'm making 5 to 10 grand a month pretty consistently. I'm somewhat, okay. I'm like, all right, cool. I've hit some of the initial goals that I've had, right? There was a point where I was like, no, like, fuck this. Like, I'm wasting my potential. I need to max this out and I need to take this to the next level, right? And the thing is like, nobody's going to have that conversation with you except for you. There was a point where, I really sat down and like totally defined my goals, right? And like, it seems very simple. We ask our prospects to do it all day. right? We asked them to give us specific goals, timelines. Why is that so important to you? How would that make you feel? Things like that, right? I'm like, okay, cool. Like, let me take that to a higher level, right? If I'm going to challenge my prospect to get clear on their goals, let me get clear on my goals by 2-3 times what anyone else will, right? You write it all out, right? You write down, okay, cool. That individual, the version of myself that's actually accomplishing these goals, right? What are their day-to-day routines? What are their habits? What are their skill sets, right? What are the beliefs that that individual has about himself? What are the things that I'm currently doing that that individual is not doing? And the thing is, it's very easy to identify these things because you know it, right? You have a conscious mind where, like, whenever you do some stupid shit, whenever you pick up a donut, whenever you're lazy, whenever you're not, in alignment with your goals, like, there's a voice in your head that says, yo, like, you shouldn't be doing that. But then you negotiate with it and then you say, don't worry, it's not that big of a deal. And every single time you run that negotiation, like, that's really how you build your identity and what you're all about, right? That goes back to, the first point that I made, right? So it's like, once you really define this, you give yourself no excuses, right? You act in alignment with your goals, in absolute alignment with your goals over the course of long periods of time. What happens is like, now here's the fucking key, because here's what happens with these closers, right? But, like, how is it possible that people with the exact same leads, the exact same commission structure, everything being equal, one guy's making 4 times the other guy, right? A big reason why is because, and especially for myself, like, always on sales calls, I've prided myself on being the exact individual that I am in real life. Like, I pride myself on being absolutely authentic. I get such a weird fucking feeling whenever I hop on a sales call as a customer and, I start seeing what the closer's doing, and, like, I just want to fucking shoot myself, like, it's like, just like, it's such a painful experience because it's so obvious to tell when someone's not being authentic, right? So it's like, I really pride myself on being authentic on my calls, right? Here's the point that I was going to make, is that a lot of people, they, again, they're going through their scripts, their processes, whatever. Maybe some people are better at faking it than others. But when, you have a prospect, for example, they give you some limiting belief bullshit when you're in challenge, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I don't know, I've just been trying to find the perfect thing for me, and, nothing works for me, and all these, scammers and gurus and, all these business models don't work, and I'm just, none of it is my fault, right? It's like, you can go through, okay, cool, gotcha. Well, like, let me ask you this. Maybe you have your, like, 3 fucking questions that you have listed out from your sales trainer that he told you to ask in that moment, right? Or you can come and, like, you can genuinely listen to that individual explain their limiting belief. You can think back and, like, remember how, put yourself in their shoes. Think back and remember how once you used to have the exact same limiting beliefs. And then you can take them through the exact same mental process that you went through as an individual to overcome that limiting belief and to see a result. Like, what do you think is more impactful? Like, what do you think gets people to move? What do you think really hits someone at their core and gets them to go and make a decision, right? And that comes from, acting in total alignment with your goals, right? And that's kind of the cool thing with sales, is that, on the journey to, like, making a shit ton of money and making great commission checks every month, you, like, have to develop yourself into a, truly like a different level individual. And, that's what it's all about at the end of the day, right? Not to get, like, corny and shit, but that's really what it's all about, right? And, like, that's the, at the end of the day, like, 20 grand a month, like, cool, it's a cool benchmark, it's a cool milestone, but, like, the individual that you become to earn, $250,000 a year in sales, the kind of individual that you need to be to go from 0 to being able to do that is going to make you way more fucking money than $20,000 a month ever will. Okay, in any endeavor that you ever pursue. So, yeah, guys, those are some of my takeaways. Those are some of the trends that I've seen with, all of our closers. And I think, one of the reasons, what's interesting is because it probably took me about 3.5 years, I want to say, to hit my first $20,000 a month, like, significantly slower than you see a lot of people hitting it online. I mean, and that's assuming that they're telling the truth. But what's interesting is that, because I started doing this in 2019, right? We've built our agency from scratch, both as a closer. I've also worked as a manager. What's interesting now is that, even in our training program, Millionaire Closers, right? It's like we can work with guys, and we see guys on the end. I see guys coming in who are at, like, 20, 21 years old. Within their first 12 months of sales, they're pushing $15,000, $20,000 a month. We've had some cases where people have done it in as little as 6 months. And I think a big reason as to why is because, we can pass on the lessons. Like, I can share the things that I had to figure out on my own over the course of 3.5 years, and pass that down to someone to implement immediately, right? Where there's certain blind spots, there's certain things that you don't really get when you go through it on your own. And that's really what we try to do. If you want to be a part of our coaching program where we train closers, help them find their first role and scale their commissions, link is going to be down below. Otherwise, go ahead and like, subscribe, drop a comment down below with your biggest takeaway, and I'll see you on the next one.